Hello and welcome to this first installment of translating Julius Caesar's account of the Battle of Pharsalus in Book 3 of his Civil War, starting today with section 83, in which he relates some of the disagreements and dissension that's going on in his rival Pompey's command tent just before the battle. So let's get into the text. Iam de sacerdotio Caesaris, Domitius, Scipio, Spinthique Lentulus, quotidianis contentionibus ad gravissimas verborum contumelias palam descenderunt, cum Lentulus itatis honorum ostentaret, Domitius urbanum gratiam dignitatem quae iactaret, Scipio ad finitate Pompei confideret. Now, for the first line, we could jump to the verb, but I don't think we really need to. We can just take the words as they come. So iam is an adverb of time. It just means now or already in this context. So Caesar's been building up to this point, so already is probably more suitable. De sacerdotio Caesaris. So we have this preposition de. When used with the ablative, it indicates with regards to or on the subject of something. So de bello civili, on the civil war. Here, de with sacerdotio, which is an ablative singular, sacerdotium, priesthood. You can sort of see the root of English sacred there. And Caesaris, which is genitive singular of Caesar's name. So we have already with regards to Caesar's priesthood, or more literally the priesthood of Caesar, but that sounds a little bit weird. Domitius, Scipio, Spinthique Lentulus. So we have a string of names joined here with que, which is a conjunction meaning and. It's one of many ways in Latin you can say and. So these are all nominative and masculine singular. Spinthique Lentulus, this is one person, so two names, one person. So we got three people who are going to be the subject of the upcoming verb. Quotidianis contentionibus. So these are both ablative plural. Quotidianus is an adjective agreeing with contentionibus. And the meaning of it is really adverbial in English. You would say daily. It's something which has happened every day. And it's contentionibus that's happening every day. English contention, you can see from that, it's a similar sort of meaning of disagreements or quarrels or confrontations, arguments, that sort of sense. So in the ablative, in this case, ablative indicating the sphere or context in which action is taking place. So we've got in daily arguments or in daily confrontations. A thesaurus is your friend there. Ad gravissimas verborum contumelias. So we have this preposition ad when used with the accusative indicating motion towards, or more abstractly, the end or goal that's being aimed at, or the end towards which action is tending. And so we have our accusative here. So this is a superlative adjective, feminine plural, gravissimas. So you can again see English grave from that in the sense of serious or heavy, which has a similar meaning in Latin. From that, you can also extend it to low in the derogatory sense, or base in that derogatory sense again, because it's the idea Caesar's going to be conveying here is that in these daily quarrels, they're descending to a low level of just insulting each other. So basest, and so it's superlative, so the most serious or the lowest, etc. Agreeing with contumelias, so there's our feminine plural ending again. It's really disrespect or outrages, insults is fine here given the context. There's an old-fashioned English word, contumelious, which comes directly from this. Disrespectful, even disobedient, but not in this context. So the most serious outrages, Jane Gardner goes for virulent for Groissimas. The most virulent insults were boredom, like English verbal. That's a genitive plural of kind. Literally the most serious outrages of words or something along those lines, but it's more natural to translate in English as the most serious verbal insults, or even just the most serious insults. That already carries with it the implication that it's verbal. The basest insults, and so on. Palem is an adverb, so openly, publicly, in the open, in public, descenderunt. And there's our verb, so that's third person plural, perfect tense, indicative active. Like English descend, it has the same meaning here. So they descended to the most virulent insults or the most serious abuse, or however you want to translate that. Okay, next line, and we start off with cum, which is something of a homonym. It can be a preposition or it can be a conjunction. It has a few different grammatical functions it can perform depending on the context. So we'll go to the next word just to rule out whether it's a preposition or not. So we have lentulus again in the nominative. So cum, when it's a preposition, is used with the ablative. That's not an ablative, so it's not a preposition. But we still need to figure out what it is, and so we try and determine that from the context. And so we'll jump to the verb. Me ostentaret. So it's an imperfect subjunctive, third person singular active. Kind of linked to English ostentation, ostensibly, that sense. Really, though, it's saying that lentulus is who's the subject for the verb, obviously, is in the nominative, making an argument for or demonstrating, making a show of, even. Insisting upon as well, given the context. And he's insisting upon honorums, that's our direct object, accusative singular, like English honor, but you can extend that, like dignity, respect, prestige, that sort of sense as well. And etatis, which is a genitive of kind again, genitive singular, meaning age. So lentulus is insisting upon the respect due to his age, that's one translation, or he's demonstrating the case for the precedence of age, superior merit of age might be a stretch, but really he's making an argument on the basis of his own age of why it is that he should be taking up Caesar's priesthood. And so from that, going back to cum, probably determine it's not going to be indicating time when, and it's probably not concessive either in the sense of English although. So that leaves us with causal cum, which is just to indicate, sort of like the English word since, to indicate why it is that these people have descended to, in public, to the most virulent insults. And so one reason for that is that Lentulus would insist upon, yes, his own suitability for the office based on his age. And Domitius, so another nominative subject for iactaret, which is another imperfect subjunctive, third person singular active. That verb is it's got a very violent connotation. because it's normally used in descriptions of combat. It's for people hurling weapons or casting weapons, throwing javelins, that sort of sense. Um, Here, it's more like, go back to Jane Gardner's translation, it's more like boasting, but that doesn't feel violent enough for me. It's really like, in English, we'd say someone's hurling abuse. It's that sort of sense. He's quite vehemently arguing for this. Urbanum gratium dignitatem quae, which are all direct objects. Urbanum gratium goes a lot further than urban gratitude. It's the support of the city, goodwill of the city, his popularity in the city. That'd be a way to translate it into English. Yeah, urban gratitude just doesn't really capture what Caesar intends by that. And dignitatem quae. So we've got that quae again, meaning and. Dignitatem, another word, again, meaning sort of prestige, public standing, influence. Yeah, that's the sense of that. So, but Domitius is really being quite violent about that. He's hurling these things like a javelin at them. So there we go with that. And Scipio, another nominative, so it's going to be the subject of confiderat, another imperfect subjunctive, third person singular active. Like English confide, he's putting his trust in something. And so that takes an ablative, which is ad finitate. So ablative singular, like English affinity, but in the more old-fashioned sense of a family relationship, either by blood or, in this case, by marriage to Pompey. Really, that's a genitive, but genitive of person concerned, it's more natural to translate into English. His marriage ties to Pompey, or his marriage alliance with Pompey, something like that. And so, out of all that, something I prepared earlier, already with regard to Caesar's priesthood, Domitius, Scipio, and Lentulus Spintha had publicly descended to the basest verbal abuse in daily confrontations. Since Lentulus would claim the precedence due to his age, Domitius cast in their teeth his public standing and the goodwill of the city, and Scipio trusted in his marriage alliance with Pompey. So I've stretched it out a bit. It's not a literal translation because it gets a little bit clunky trying to be too literal. So I've tried to make it clear, especially, so I'm keeping a kind of non-specialist reader in mind and trying to convert the Latin into a sense that an English reader would understand. So claiming the precedence of age, that's a bit of a stretch, but captures what Lentulus is arguing for. Domitius cast in their teeth, that's very idiomatic, but I wanted to capture the violence of the verb and also retain that sense of casting something. So his public standing, dignitatem, and the goodwill of the city, city with a capital C, indicating Rome, and Scipio trusted in his marriage alliance with Pompey. So by no means a definitive translation, it's just balancing what the Latin literally says with making it intelligible to a modern reader. And what was I going to say about that? So yeah, cum as a indicating cause takes a subjunctive, so that's why these are all subjunctive. And it's also imperfect to indicate continuous action, as an imperfect tense does. So it's kind of going on, they had descended, and in this sense, continuously making these arguments about why it is that they are most suited for Caesar's priesthood. So the priesthood in question is the Pontifex Maximus, it's the chief priest of Jupiter, pretty much right at the apex of the Roman priestly hierarchy. It carries a great deal of political influence within the city as well, or political prestige. And so that's one of the reasons why everyone wants the position. Um, we also see here, because it's an elected priesthood, so that was a change which took place about 15 years before. There's something of Roman electioneering going on here as well. So these are the kind of arguments that people would put forward in general, just for why it is that they're suitable for a political office. And age is actually a good thing. It'd be more in the sense of experience. Like, I've seen things, I've done things, that's why I'm suitable for this office. Domitius obviously arguing here that, hey, you guys all know me, I'm a good guy. Also, I have a great deal of dignitas, public standing, prestige. Also, Domitius himself, I mean, they're all aristocrats, but Domitius's father had also been Pontifex Maximus, so his family is quite distinguished for that reason. And Scipio, of course, connected to Pompey, so saying, well, you guys know Pompey, he's the great conqueror of the East, defeated the pirates, maybe don't think too much about what he did prior to that. Um, and so that's part of it as well. But it's not really about policy. Like, it's not merely propaganda on Caesar's part to omit that Roman elections were almost never about policy or reform or isms or ists or anything like that. It really was just people and personalities. And it's not like they tried to hide that either. They didn't try and pretend that they had policies for anything. They just openly made it about themselves, or who they knew. And similarly for religious office, there's no indication of religion, and that, again, it's not just propaganda. For this position in particular, but for religious office in general too. I mean, it wasn't a matter of faith and piety. These things were more or less taken for granted. So there was no doubt that the Roman nobility, in general at least, accepted a sort of divine structure of things. So they take it all for granted and treat the chief priesthood of Jupiter as just another political office, basically, another dignity. Something which they want to add to their tombstone one day and say that, yes, I achieved this in addition to being all of the other officers of the Cursus Honorum in suo anno in my own time, in the right year. I also achieved this. And final note on Domitius, so as I mentioned, his father was Pontifex Maximus as well, but he's also an ancestor of the future Emperor Nero. So Domitius's son would marry a daughter of Mark Antony by Octavia. Octavia was Augustus's sister, and so one branch of the Julio-Claudian imperial family descends from Domitius. And so when Nero was born, his birth name was actually Lucius Domitius Anabarbus, descended from Domitius, or Domitius. And there we go. That's the first sentence. Moving on. Postulavit etiam Lycium Ephraenium proditionis exequitus Acutius Rufus apud Pompeium quod gestum in Hispania dicerat. So I will get back to essay. It's not actually in the text, but it's implied. Postulavit, so we're starting off with a verb, which is a bit unusual for Caesar's Latin, and Latin of this time. So just going back to that first sentence, the verbs are usually at the end of clause or an idea. You can see here, but in this case, Caesar's decided to start the sentence with a verb, so it's indicating a very emphatic position. He really wants to draw attention to something. And so postulavit, he's drawing attention to this verb. It's third person perfect tense, singular, pardon me, indicative, means to make an accusation. And we've got this adverb here as well that's sort of adding to the emphasis. So it's kind of a compound. It's et iam, so et and like et tu brute, and iam, which we met before. But really it translates as something like he even accused, which is what postulavit is getting at. I mean, it really means and then or and now, but in the context, more like, yeah, he even accused, or since we have a subject, Acutius Rufus even accused. And so that's two names, one person, nominative singular, and postulavit accused. So don't translate that as postulate, because that is not what it means. Okay, so Acutius Rufus has accused, and here's our direct object, Lucium Ephraenium. So Lucius Ephraenius, Proditionis executus. So he's accused him, like in English, you accuse someone of something, and that's what's going on here. So this is a genitive singular of proditio. It's a betrayal, treachery, more literally a leading astray of something, but really betrayal. So betrayal and executus. So you might think that's a bog standard second declension nominative singular. It is not. It is a fourth declension genitive singular. The word for army. So Phrenius has been accused of betrayal of the army, and it's Acutius Rufus who is doing this, and is doing this apud Pompeium. So apud is a preposition meaning before, in front of, used with the accusative, which is Pompeium, so accusative Pompeius, Pompey. So he's done this in front of Pompey, may indicating also this is in public, and more than likely an official formal occasion. So a fair bit of ceremonial going into it, maybe a tribunal, curule chair, Pompey sitting there with wand of office, his general's cape on, etc., hearing this accusation that Acutius Rufus is making about Ephraenius. Quod. So this is actually a neuter relative pronoun. If there's no clear antecedent in the clause that comes before it, it usually means that the sense of the quad clause is in apposition. Like it's merely providing clarification or explanation of the preceding. So that's what's going on here. It's a bit weird to see it neuter and it's not agreeing with anything, or it's not clear that it's going to be the subject of anything following either. And so we have quad, that's accusative singular of the neuter. So which, and we'll go to the verb. And that's decaret, so third person subjunctive, singular active. So he said, again, in the context of an accusation, you could say alleged or claimed, something along those lines. And so accusative and infinitive. So it's dependent on decaret, gestum, and esse implied. So it's not actually written in the text, but we get that from the accusative and infinitive construction. So gestum, or gestum esse is perfect passive infinitive. Gestum, somewhat related to English, like gestate, gestation, something that's managed, or really in the verbal form, something that has been managed. In Hispania. So in with the ablative takes a similar sort of meaning to English. So in Hispania, in Spain. So which he said had been managed in Spain. Had You could also translate that had happened in Spain. Same thing, really. Um, Normally, you wouldn't want to switch around an active and a passive, but uh, again, to get the sort of natural English sense, I've seen a few translations just say it happened in Spain. And so from all that, we get Acutius Rufus even accused Lucius Afranius before Pompey of betraying the army, which he claimed to have been carried out in Spain. Reasonably straightforward. Just for a bit of context, so early in the Civil War, Caesar crossed the Rubicon, conquered Italy, just missed Pompey at the boot of Italy. And so instead of following Pompey to Greece, he went to Spain to deal with Pompey's veteran legions, which were based there, under the command of Afranius. After about 6 weeks, Caesar had won the war in Spain, and Afranius, of course, has to hightail it out of there. He goes back to Greece, and poor Afranius is then accused of betraying the army. Afranius had, in one capacity or another, had basically served Pompey for about 30 years by this point. So I think this is one of the reasons why Caesar is so emphatic about this. And the other one being, of course, that Caesar was in Spain and fought against Afranius and probably knew better than anyone else whether there was any treachery involved. So the indications are that he's emphatic about this, but he's not buying a word of it. He's just saying, like, can you believe that Acutius Rufus accused Afranius of treachery? This is just ridiculous. And to Pompey's credit, there's no indication that he took this seriously either. In the Battle of Pharsalus, Afranius is in command of Pompey's, or at least those troops Pompey considers to be his best. So there's no indication that Pompey took this seriously. Caesar doesn't seem to be taking it seriously. He's probably just having a laugh as he writes this. But poor Afranius probably did have to take it seriously. And anything else I wanted to say about that? I think the subjunctive here, decarat, it's a bit weird. I mean, I think it is just that it's subordinate in some sense to postulare. I think that's why he's going for the subjunctive there. It's not totally clear because he doesn't really need to have that in the subjunctive. But I think it is because it's somehow subordinate to postulare. It's still part of his accusation. And moving on. Et Lucius Domitius in concilio dixit placere sibi bello confecto turnas tabulas dari adjudicandum eius, qui ordinis essent senatori belloque, una cum ipsis interfuissent, sententiasque de singulis ferent, qui Romae remanzissent, quique intra presidia Pompei fuissent, neque operam in re militari pristatissent. And so there's a little bit going on there. So again, we can just start with the first word. So that's and Lucius Domitius. So he's back again. So we've got another subject for an upcoming verb. In concilio. So that preposition in with ablative. So concilio from concilium, like English council, in council. And there's our verb, dixit. So that's third person, singular, active indicative, perfect tense. So he said, placare, and then we go into accusative and infinitive. And just for a bit of fun, we also have a series of relative clauses with the subjunctive. So we kind of got this qui subjunctive, qui subjunctive, qui subjunctive. That's got two verbs actually in the subjunctive. Okay, and so just to start off, so placere sibi. So this is present infinitive, active infinitive of the verb to be pleasing, and sibi is the third person reflexive pronoun in the dative singular. So he said, literally, it would be pleasing to himself or pleasing for himself, but it's not quite what is meant here. Not in an English translation anyway. Really, he said it would be a good idea, or he thought it would be a good idea. Really, he said it would be a good idea, or even that he would like. That construction still survives into modern languages like French or Italian. So if you say in French, say "tu me plais," really you mean I like you. You're not really thinking you are pleasing to me. Or in Italian, if you say mi piace il calcio, I like football, not football is pleasing to me. So that comes from that construction or that sort of form. Really, he's just saying it would be a good idea. And bello confecto, so that's our first ablative absolute. And so we have bello in the nominative singular, um, the word for war, as it is in the title of Caesar's work. So bello and confecto, that's the perfect tense, ablative participle confecto. So agreeing with bello, it's really completed. But in this context, once the war had been won is how you would translate that. I guess you could also say the war having been won, but really ablative absolute indicating time when. But it's kind of a sense of future completion. And so we've got our subject in the accusative, because we're in accusative and infinitive. Turnas tabulas. So tabulas, so feminine plural, like English tablet. So the Romans would, at this time, use wooden tablets, which had a sort of layer of wax on top. They'd gouge writing into it. Pardon me. And in a voting context, they'd also use these tablets to gouge in um, whether they considered the accused to be innocent or guilty, acquittal or condemnation. And so tabulas is kind of what's meant here. Turnas, a set of three, and that's agreeing with tabulas. So it's kind of like English tertiary three, but it really means a set of three. It's not the number three. To be given, so that's a passive present infinitive of the verb to give. So a set of three tablets to be given ad judicandum. So we've got that ad again with the accusative. This is a gerundive, which we don't have gerundives in English, so it's a little bit of a strange concept. It's got qualities which are both as a noun, but also a verb and also a passive adjective. And there are certain, and its actual functions can extend further the meaning of a word. So it's fairly versatile as well. And there are times when the sense of something can just be conveyed by a very simple phrase. So ad judicandum, really for the purpose of voting, you can kind of see a stem of English like judicial, judiciary there, and that's what's meant is voting in the context of a jury voting. If you want to, as I've done, and as Jane Gardner does, you don't necessarily need to translate the full sort of purpose clause from that. Like for the purpose of voting, you could just translate as a participle for tabulas and say a set of three voting tablets to be given, rather than a set of three tablets to be given for the purpose of voting. So that's, yeah, so ad judicandum, so ad plus gerundive in the accusative indicates purpose. Again, that ad indicating the end towards which an action is intended. And they are to be given AS, so that's dative plural, so indirect object taking the dative of the demonstrative adjective, though in this case, an adjective used substantively, so performing as a noun in this sentence. So it's going to be given to those, and here's our relative pronoun qui in the nominative plural, so to those who. And we'll jump to the verb essent. So that's third person plural, subjunctive, active, imperfect tense. Those who were ordinus senatori. So senatori is clearly related to English senator, senatorial. That's what it means here. It's genitive singular agreeing with ordinus. And ordinus, again, English order is fairly clear from that. So genitive of kind of the senatorial order is what this phrase means. So they're going to be giving tablets to those of the senatorial order, or you could just say those who were senators. And so we got that que indicating and. Bello, once again, that ablative singular of the word for war. In this case, though, it's indicating, again, the sort of context in which action is taking place. So we've got, and in the war, jump to the verb. So we've got a pluperfect subjunctive, third person plural active. Pardon me. So pluperfect, so it's something which has already happened or been established by the time that Domitius is speaking. So dixit in the perfect tense, interfuisent, remanescent, fuisent, and praestatiscent all in the pluperfect as things really already having been established by the time he's speaking. In contrast, essent, it's a continuous state of being for, like, it's not as though they stopped being senators by the time he started speaking. It's not a completed action by that point. It's something continuous and something that's going to be part of the future state that Domitius is talking about. He wants to give tablets to people who are senators, but also senators after the time he's speaking. So interfuescent, pluperfect, had been present. So in the war, had been present. Una cum ipsis. So una, much more than one. It's an adverb meaning together, sort of many as one, e pluribus unum kind of concept. So together, they'd been in the war cum, and so we've got to determine what it is that cum's doing here. So we'll go to the next word, which is ipsis. So this is in the ablative plural of the emphatic pronoun. So cum is acting as a preposition meaning with. Ipsis, that reflexive pronoun, or emphatic pronoun rather, with themselves. So, and in the war had been present with themselves. So we got senators present in the war with themselves. But he goes on. Sententiasque, and that que. Sententias is the accusative plural, like English sentence in the judicial meaning of the word, like a judge handing out a sentence. So we've got sentences, and we'll go to the verb. So this is imperfect subjunctive, third person plural active of ferre, which literally means to bear or carry something. In this context, it's a recurring phrase in Latin, like ferent sententias. Really, they're casting votes for sentences. That's the sense of that verb, and especially from the context as well. They're all being given voting tablets for the purpose of voting sentences. De singulis. So de, that preposition again with regards to. singulus. So that's an ablative plural. English singular is pretty clear from that. When referring to persons in the plural, it's with regards to individuals. So they're going to be casting votes, casting votes for sentences or something along those lines. With regards to those individuals who, or with regards to individuals who, so nominative plural here, Romi at Rome, so that's locative, remangescent. So that's another pluperfect subjunctive, third person plural active. English remained is pretty clear from that. So it's those who remained at Rome. But there's more. So quae, so that means and. This is our relative pronoun, nominative plural. Yes, I said nominative. Again, intra praesidia Pompey. Pardon me. So intra has the same meaning in Latin as it does in English, sort of among. Praesidia, accusative plural of praesidium, literally means something like a guard. But in this context, it's more like retinue, or I've gone with command staff. The people intended by Domitius in this context are Roman nobles. It's not literally Pompey's guards. So the nobles aren't necessarily guarding Pompey, but they are part of his, like another translation of presidium is support. That's the sense that I've gone with. It's those who were serving on Pompey's command staff and are Roman nobles. And Pompey being the genitive singular of Pompeius, so it's a possessive. So among Pompey's command staff, among Pompey's retinue. And this is just the verb to be, but it's pluperfect subjunctive, third person, plural active. So fuisent, had been. And you can see the connection to interfuisent and fuisent. So interfuisent, to be present, is kind of a compound of the verb to be. So those who have been among Pompey's command staff, neque. So we got this negation, ne, plus the que meaning and. So and not. And we'll jump to the verb. Praestatiscent, that's another pluperfect subjunctive, third person, plural active. Present for duty, perform duty, put your hand up for duty, stand up for duty, that sort of sense. Taking operam, it's a direct object, so normally that would mean, so am, it's feminine, accusative singular, work or labor, but in this context, in re militari. So in preposition with ablative, re militari, ablative phrase. I wouldn't translate that too literally. I don't think you want to say in the military matter or the military. Yeah, the military matter. A bit weird. Those who had not performed their military duty is the sense of this phrase. Re militari, kind of like res publica, it's a set phrase in Latin. But you wouldn't necessarily translate res publica as the public matter. It's the same thing here. They hadn't performed their duty in the military matter, just sounds a bit weird. So they hadn't performed their military duty, even they hadn't performed active service or hadn't performed combat service, since that's more towards what Domitius is going for. That's the sense of that. So something I prepared earlier. And Lucius Domitius said in council that he thought it would be a good idea, once the war had been won, for a set of 3 voting tablets to be given to those who were of the senatorial order and had been present in the war together with themselves, and that they vote sentences on those individuals who had remained at Rome, as well as against those who had been among Pompey's command staff but had not performed their military duty. So Domitius is basically suggesting let's set up a court and start trying. So neutrals, possibly collaborators, those who remained at Rome after Caesar had taken the city. So they're either collaborating with Caesar's regime or they're not actively trying to tear it down, not actively fighting against it. Pardon me. But we also have. So it's interesting that Domitius makes this point. So there are people among Pompey's staff who are present but not actually taking part in any action. Seems as though perhaps when there is an operation or an action to be carried out, that they do a Houdini and are nowhere to be found, or maybe they're making excuses for why it is that they can't take part. Um, it's interesting, though, that this is something that he has noticed is going on. So all is not well with the army, it would seem. And this whole procedure that he comes up with, it's a bit unusual because there were existing procedures for, say, treason in the Roman court system. So why it is that Domitius feels the need to set up this kind of ad hoc court that's going to be impaneled from people who were present in the war with themselves. Not really sure, unless he's just thinking perhaps this is a better way to get convictions. The whole thing is pretty unusual. And moving on, so just to finish the sentence, and then we'll wrap up the sense of what this all means. So, unam fore tabulam. So this is accusative and infinitive still from Dixit. It's not in a subordinate clause though, so it's not introduced by qui or anything like that. So it goes into accusative and infinitive. So we've got a singular in this case of tablet and unam meaning one. Fore, the future infinitive of the verb to be. So again, that sort of switch of tense is to indicate something. This is the sort of ideal future that Domitius is aiming at. So there would be one tablet, or one tablet would be. Me. Qui, so we've got nominative plural relative pronoun, and that's taking subjunctive, as are the others here. Qui subjunctive, qui subjunctive. So nominative plural, and Caesar's basically making a dot point list with this sentence. Those who can serent, so that's imperfect third person plural active, somewhat related to English census, sort of to make a judgment about something based on evidence or statistics or, um, yeah, evidence. And so those who would judge liberandos, so that's accusative plural. It's another gerundive though. And from liber, you can kind of see root of English liberty. It's a gerundive of suitability, so that's that kind of extension of the gerundive's function. So those who would judge them suitable for freedom, omni periculo. So we've got ablative singular, omni, meaning all, so it's an adjective, qualifying periculo, danger. So those who would judge them suitable for freedom from all danger. Really, it means an acquittal, those who would acquit them, but literally freedom from all danger, or suitable for freedom from all danger. Another, so note this is also in the accusative because it's not part of the subordinate relative clause. So alteram, qui, so that's our relative pronoun, nominative plural again, damnarent. So imperfect subjunctive, third person plural active again. Like damn, damnation, that sort of sense. It's a judgment, but a negative one. And capitis is a genitive of price from caput. meaning head. It really literally those who would damn their heads. And you're probably not going to translate that literally into English because it sounds just a little bit wild. Um, really, so there's a bit of discussion in translations about what this is supposed to mean. It could mean, so it comes up in Roman law, like later Roman law especially, as execution. So, English, like strike his head, that sort of sense. But at this time, it's more likely to mean either like disenfranchisement, exile, that sort of sense. In any case, it's judging them guilty in the most severest sense, and it doesn't sound too good. And tertium, so it's tertiary, third, again, that's in the accusative, because it's still going back to dixit, but not part of the relative clause. Qui, nominative plural, relative pronoun, multarent, and that's imperfect subjunctive, third person plural active again. They would levy a fine. Pecunia, it's taking an ablative in the singular. In this case, pecunia in money. So those who would levy a fine in money. And the imperfect, again, this is referring to that sort of ideal future state that Domitius is talking about. I mean, and so there would be one tablet, those who judged they should be acquitted. Another, those who would attain to them. So I've gone for attaint. It's to retain the sort of ominous ambiguity about what this is supposed to mean. I think it's deliberate on Caesar's part to use the phrase capitis damnarent, because it could mean execution. It probably doesn't, though. And assuming that this meeting took place and Domitius was suggesting this, he probably didn't mean execution. But I think Caesar's deliberately included this kind of as a similar, almost similar to a clickbait headline, something like that. He really wants to grab the reader's attention and make an implied point of, like, boy, aren't you guys lucky that I actually won the war? Because if I lost, you guys were in for a whole lot of trouble. So attained, like attained of treason. Yeah, it also has an ominous ambiguity. It doesn't necessarily mean execution, but it could. It could also mean deprivation of civic rights. And a third for those who would levy a fine. So it's fairly straightforward. It's an interesting note on multarent. So there's a noun related to this, which is multa, and it means a fine, but it means specifically a fine levied in head of cattle. It seems like this has a very archaic origin, and so perhaps it needs to be specified that it's a fine levied in money. Just speculating on that. But it's a strange process that Domitius has suggested here. Also, so each juror in this case, it seems, is given 3 tablets, and as each individual case is brought forward, they cast one of 3 votes, either acquittal, capitis damnarent, whatever that's supposed to mean, or they would levy a fine in money. So it's not leaving a lot of room for graded sentencing. He's just saying we're going to do one of 3 things with our ad hoc court to punish all of these collaborators and neutrals. It's a strange suggestion. Of course, we don't have any indication of how this was received by the people who were hearing it. Maybe they were just thinking the same thing as Caesar and saying, "Oh my gosh, what what are you talking about, Domitius?" But who knows? Also, I'd be interested to find out who Caesar's informant was for this. Caesar himself obviously wasn't sitting there listening to it, so I'd be curious to find out who that was. possibly Marcus Brutus, who I think would have been, yeah, he would have been in the command tent. I mean, who knows? We're moving on. Finally, so that's what post-remo means, or one of the meanings. Finally, at the last, in summary, ultimately, it's an adjective in the ablative, so it has an adverbial kind of sense to it. Yeah, at the last, or something along those lines, ultimately. Caesar's point is really to indicate that he's about to wrap everything up and sort of put it all together in a neat summary of his own thoughts. So finally, ultimately, is what I've gone with. That's the meaning of that. So I think it's posterus is the nominative form, and then post remo in the ablative. Omnes. So we have nominative subject. So for agebant. It's an adjective used substantively. So it really means all, they all. And then we've got out repeated here. So this means or, as in alternatives. Since there's three of them, Latin is fine with this. It'll just go out, 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 or et. English, it feels a little bit weird. So the first one I'd translate as either, and then the next two as or. And so you've got either de honoribus suis. So we've got that preposition de once again with the ablative plural in this case of, what would that be, honores? So honoribus, yeah, with regards to dignities, offices, and suis agreeing with that in the ablative plural. So that's a possessive adjective. So with regards to their own offices, like political and religious offices, you could stretch that. So I stretch that out and say with regards to their own advancement, which is intended, but it's not quite literal. So that there's alternatives you can go for. Out de premius pecuniae, so or de with regards to premius, ablative plural. Pecuniae is actually a genitive of kind again. So we've got with the from premium meaning gain in this case of money, or with regards to the gain of money, you wouldn't really translate that as a plural in English. The gains of money sounds a bit weird. Out de persequendis inimicitius, or with regards to, and we have another gerundive. This is ablative plural, agreeing with inimicitius. So it wouldn't really translate that as a passive, though. Again, it's kind of sound a little bit funky in English. You can sort of see persecute, pursue from that word, and so inimicitious, like English enmity, the opposite of amity, amicitia. It's, disagreements, quarrels, feuds is more to the point, I think. Like feuds, grievances. And so it's really with regards to the pursuit of grievances or the pursuit of feuds. I mean, agebant. So it's our verb in the indicative, third person plural imperfect. We get English act from this word. That's fine in this context. That's basically what Caesar's describing. Scheming, if you wanted to really convey the sense of it. I've gone with maneuvering, because this verb can also have a sense of uh, like driving a carriage or driving animals forward. So I've gone with maneuvering. So they were all acting, scheming, maneuvering with regards to their own offices or the gain of money or the pursuit of private feuds. That's one way to translate that. Neck. So that's an alternative form of neckway. So and not. So we have that negation and not. And I'll go to the verb here, so that's cogitabat. It's another imperfect in the indicative, third person plural active. Like English, cogitate, cognizance, cognition, compound, like recognize, giving thought to something, thinking on something, even planning for something. But they're not doing that. And they're not doing quibus rationibus. So we got ablative plural. It's relative pronoun. Rationibus, related to English rationality, rational, it's a plan, again, something put together from evidence, properly thought through. So by which plans, or in this context, by which strategy, by which tactics, so we're talking about a battle, so strategy, tactics also works for that. Possent, so we're going into the subjunctive here. So again, we've got this relative subordinate clause, ultimately dependent on cogitabat, like what they were thinking, or really what they were not thinking. Possent, third person plural subjunctive imperfect active, the verb to be able, and that's taking an infinitive. Superare, so you can sort of see English super there, but in a more, like in the Latin sense, it means to go above something, or like so to overcome, or to go beyond something. But to overcome, to prevail, even to win in this context again. So they were not considering by which strategy they would be able to overcome, or by which strategy they would be able to win, maybe. Sed, which is English but, so in contrast to something, but or but rather. Quem ad modum, so we've got a relative pronoun again. This is in the accusative. Ad with accusative, again indicating that sort of end aimed at. So they're not considering, pardon me, by which means they would be able to win, but rather, I'd really translate that as how. Quem ad modum, yeah. Like we have modum that survives into some phrases we still use in English, like modus vivendi, modus operandi, like mode, manner, like not magic manner, but the way in which. Yeah, to which manner, to which way means. It feels a little bit clunky. Although if you can come up with a good translation, like go right ahead. I can't at the moment. Deberent. So that's our subjunctive verb again. Third person plural imperfect active. Related to English debit, debt, but in a sort of more extended sense, not just financial. Sort of a commitment, an obligation. If you know English, if you know English, hopefully you know English, otherwise this is not going to make a whole lot of sense. If you've done modern French or modern Italian, there's verbs like devoir, dovere in Italian that come from this, to have an obligation, to have to do something. That's what this means. Although in the subjunctive as well, it is in a subordinate clause from cogitabant, though, but I think it's also in the sense of English would, or for this word ought, how they ought. And like modern languages, it's going to take an infinitive, so how they ought, uti, to use. That's a present infinitive of utor, from which we get English use. In this context, it has a bit more of a negative connotation, though. Could also translate that as exploit. Sort of in the way, like in English, if you are used by someone or if you use someone, it's a sense, there can be a sense of exploitation and manipulation. It's what's meant here. and that takes an ablative. So Victoria, ablative singular, victory. So ultimately, they were all maneuvering either with regards to their own officers or the gain of money or the pursuit of private quarrels, and were not considering by which means they would be able to prevail, but rather how they ought to use the victory, or something like that. And so, something I prepared earlier, I've stretched out the sense of it a bit and tried to make it sound nice in English. Ultimately, they were all maneuvering either for their own advancement or for financial gain or the pursuit of private grievances, and were not considering by which means they could achieve a victory, but rather how they ought to exploit one. Which, again, not quite literal, but conveys the sense to an English reader fairly well, I think. And yeah, so that's Caesar summing up his thoughts for section 83. And so he's really indicating why, one of the key reasons why it is that Pompey lost the battle at Pharsalus. And it's not merely about tactics. Well, in some sense it is, because Pompey's staff are not making any substantial contribution to coming up with battle-winning tactics. They're focusing on their own private grievances and financial gain and their own advancement and so on. And so there's also an element of hubris involved there. The reason that they are not focused on the tactical side of things is because they consider victory already in the bag. By this point, Caesar's just recently lost a battle to Pompey. He lost almost 1,000 men. Not really a decisive battle, but it was a loss nonetheless. And as we'll see in the next section, it had quite an effect on the morale of Caesar's soldiers as well. And not only that, but the numbers are on Pompey's side. So by this time, he's outnumbering Caesar about 2 to 1. They also have secured their supply lines. Caesar hasn't been able to cut Pompey off from supply either from the sea or overland, whereas Caesar's army has been short of supply pretty much the entire time. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be in a future section, so I'll mention it now. There's a story Caesar relates about his men being so short of proper food that in the battle at Dyrrhachium, just prior to this, his men found some like local plant root and decided to make something they called bread out of it, which was the root, like a vegetable root, ground up, mixed with milk and baked. And then when Pompey's soldiers would taunt them about their lack of food, they would throw loaves of this so-called bread at them. Point being, though, that they're very short of supplies. And so everything seems to indicate that the victory is as good as won for Pompey's side. But that's not actually the case, as they will find out. And there you have it. So that's section 83. I hope that was relatively interesting and enjoyable and educational. Just to emphasize once again, I am not providing a definitive translation. I'm just going through an exercise, providing what I hope is clear alternatives to the translation that I provide for each part of it, and just give you an idea of the thought process that goes into translating documents of this kind. So, that in mind, I will see you guys for the next one in section 84. So if you tuned in, thanks for tuning in. And yes, I'll see you next time. Take care of yourselves, stay safe, and toodle pip.